This
Gondek this
conference will
morning.
now be recorded.
She is in transit. It should be arriving here very soon. And also just noting that we are recording this conference. It is being live streamed as per our protocol. If for some reason the live streaming fails, we will endeavor to get it back online. And if we can't, we will rely on the recording as evidence of this meeting having been conducted in public. Noting that Mayor Gondek is running a little bit late, and the closed session I know is something that she wanted to participate in. We've got a couple of other items there. I might suggest that we, although perhaps not asking for a formal reordering of the agenda, but perhaps start sort of bottom up and go with the deal, agenda item number 8, digitization of existing and improved land use as our first agenda item. Does anyone have any concerns with starting there and then seeing if Mayor Gondek can join us for the remainder of the agenda? And if there's no worries about that, I see some head nodding. That sounds good. And all right, so I will ask for a motion, please, to adopt the agenda. Mayor Thorne, Councillor Hanson, seconds. Any discussion on adoption of the agenda? And by exception, anyone wishing to vote opposed to adoption of the agenda? Hearing none, that carries. David, I think you've got a hand raised. We've got David Legg joining us here to talk about the Commonwealth Games. Welcome, David.
Thank you very much, and thank you for allowing me to join your meeting. I just wasn't sure if I should be present during this part of the meeting or not, if I should join you in a few minutes.
No problem. You're absolutely welcome. It is, although online, it is a public session, so no worries at all. Yeah, you're very welcome to be here. We will come to you. We frankly we may come to you actually after we do the deal. So we actually may just do an inverse agenda here. We'll see how it goes. There's my Gondek. So why don't we start with deal? I think that JP, if you're ready, you can take us through that. I don't think that'll take a huge amount of time based on how it went at committee. But JP Leclerc, I think will take us through the discussion on digitization of existing and approved land use. JP, over to you.
Good morning, board. I'm just waiting for my camera to turn on, sorry. Can I confirm that my audio is good?
Yeah, audio is great. Your camera's trying to turn on, but yeah, just go ahead. We'll let it run. There you are.
Okay, I think it's probably a consequence of streaming at the same time. Good morning, board. Before you is item completion of digitization of existing and approved land use version 2. The motion that the board approve deal version 2 dataset. So what is the deal dataset? It is municipal members, individual land use maps, the land use districts, put into broader regional categories, and the addition of approved statutory plans in place, such as ASPs, categories into respective planned regional categories as a single dataset. The first deal dataset was delivered to CMRB in December of 2019 and is based on data from 2018, and the deal version 2 includes 2022 available data, a more current data set. June 9th, 2022, the board approved the output for the deal version 2 dataset to be classified as open data. Throughout the process, the municipal administrations have had the opportunity to review, provide comment, or changes to the deal version 2 dataset, and this has gone on throughout the process as mentioned. On the 6th of July, the Land Use and Servicing Committee recommended to the board approval of the deal version 2 dataset. And should this be approved by the board, the final open data version will be posted on the CMRB's open data portal. Just a note that the open data has been useful for stakeholders to obtain seamless info on the CMR from the feedback that we've received in our time with that open data portal and data classification. So with that, I think I'll leave it, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
All right. JP, thank you very much. We will turn it over to the board for any questions or comments on the proposed deal version 2 data. Anyone wish to weigh in on one of my favorite subjects, being open data sharing? And I will just say, JP, you've done a tremendous amount of work, and I know there's been a lot of active participation from TAG and from various municipal staff teams, and really appreciate the input that's been provided. And as JP said, this is fairly perhaps more widely used than we might realize. We've received some pretty positive feedback. So Councillor Hansen's got your hand up. Go ahead.
Yes, the chair, I'll just reiterate what I've said before. Hopefully this will be used by academic universities, etc., and we'll see some good public use come out of this data as well, and build the next crop of awesome planners, urban designers, rural designers.
Perfect. Anyone else wish to weigh in? Okay, if not, I will ask for a motion then that the board approve the deal version 2 data set. May I have such a motion? I see in here. Mayor Janung, thank you very much. Second, Mayor Gondek, thank you. Any discussion on that motion? And by exception, anyone wishing to vote opposed to the motion that we approve the deal version 2 data set? One opposed, thank you. And that motion carries. Okay, we'll pop back up to the top part of the agenda, and your eagle-eyed Jordan Copping has noted, of course, I didn't actually get to the part of approving the minutes from our previous meeting. So why don't we do that now? Looking for a motion, please, that we approve the minutes of the June 23rd, 2023 board meeting. Anyone care to make that motion? Councillor Hansen, thank you. And a second. Deputy Mayor Fote, thank you very much. Any discussion on approving the minutes? And by exception, anyone opposed to approving the minutes from our previous meeting? None opposed. Thank you very much. That carries. Okay, now that everyone's here, why don't we just carry on with the agenda as proposed? Let's move into our closed session. So what I'm going to do is we'll all log off of here. Each participant has been sent a separate GoToMeeting link. I'm going to log out, log back in as me, and we will have that closed session and then come back into this session to deal with whatever comes out of that closed session. So I will see you on the other side, folks, in about 2 minutes.
This conference will now be recorded.
Thank you. We got the recording going back again. So thanks to everyone for your patience as we went into the closed session. I would invite a motion from a member that the board receive for information an update on the Regional Economic Development Framework. Anyone care to make that motion?
So moved, Mr. Chair. Peter from Airdrie.
Thank you very much, Mayor Brown. Do we have a seconder? Mayor Thorne, thank you. Any discussion on the motion received for information? And by exception, I'll ask for anyone wishing to vote opposed to that motion. Okay, seeing, hearing none, that motion carries. Thank you very much. Okay, we'll turn this over to Jordan for a brief update on the board's strategic initiatives. Jordan, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Chair Clark. Members of the board, normally this will be seen on the consent agenda, but we have, for the first time, one of our initiatives has slipped a bit in terms of the timeline. So you can see, I believe it's on page 8 of the agenda. It just shows that on the ATR framework, one of the member municipalities has requested additional time to review it. And so our anticipation had been to have this approved by the board at this meeting, but it will now go to the October meeting. And we just wanted to make sure that the board was aware of that. With that, I am happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you very much. Anyone want to weigh in or have any questions for Jordan on the timeline here for the Indigenous Relations Project and the ATR framework? Okay, we just wanted to make sure we brought that to everyone's attention and added that to the agenda. And so unless there's any comments or questions on that, we will move to a motion to receive for information the board strategic initiatives update. Anyone wish to make that motion? Mayor Gondek, thank you. We have a second. Mayor Thorne, thank you. Any discussion on that motion? And by exception, anyone wish to vote opposed to the motion to receive for information? Seeing, hearing none, that motion carries. Thank you very much. Okay, finally get a chance to get to our guest here. David Legg is a part of the Commonwealth Games proposal to consider bidding for the 2030 Commonwealth Games. David, you'll be glad to know that we arranged some news earlier in the week as it relates to the 2026 Commonwealth Games, just to make sure that your presentation was all that more interesting to the board. And so, yes, funny how things work that way. So,
Yeah, funny. Yeah.
funny. Anyway, I'm certain that's a question on the minds of our board members and lots of folks. There's been some discussion on that, but and of course not to completely sidetrack your presentation, of course. But I know that'll be I know that's something I'm sure you'll address. But also more broadly what the proposal is all about. I know there have been some conversations with a number of the members of the board. So with that, I will turn it over to you. And I don't know if you have a presentation. And Mayor Gondek is going to have to head out. Oh, there's the presentation. Perfect. Mayor Gondek, thank you very much for joining us. And with that, David, we'll turn it over to you. Go ahead.
Well, Chair Clark, thank you very much for the introduction. Thank you for hosting me. Mayor Genung, thank you for the recommendation and the ability to make this presentation. I am grateful for that and appreciate it. I'm actually joining you this morning from Nanaimo. My wife and I are visiting family friends, so I'm on the traditional territories of the Coast Salish people. As Chair Clark mentioned, I am helping with the group that's bidding to bid to host the Alberta 2030 Commonwealth Games. Professionally, I'm a professor at Mount Royal University in the Department of Health and Physical Education. I've been there for 25 years and I have taught a number of individuals. I was actually thinking about this. I could probably spend the next 15 minutes identifying the specific individuals that work for your recreation departments surrounding the Calgary area that have come through our program. So that's what I do professionally. Next slide, please. Thank you. So hosting the Commonwealth Games in 2030 is a rare opportunity, as with any major event that would cross jurisdictions across the province. And it's a rare opportunity for significant transformational development of a community, region, and quite honestly, our country. And it's a strategic investment into our communities that would stimulate significant social, economic, and reputational opportunities for Alberta. Notwithstanding Chair Clark's comment about the 2026 games, and we can spend time talking about that. When I prepared this slide deck, that was prior to the announcement of the 2026 Commonwealth Games in Victoria, in the state of Victoria, but we can spend some time talking about that at the end if you so choose. Now, having said that, I would argue that when properly undertaken, such as, and Alberta has a good track record, Calgary, 88, the Commonwealth Games when they were at Edmonton in 1978, the Olympic and Paralympic Games when they were in Vancouver and Whistler in 2010, the Summer Games in Okotoks for 2023. The Winter Games, when they were in Airdrie, when properly undertaken, hosting multi-sport major games can have positive impacts. And our plan is to do exactly that. And if we don't foresee that as an opportunity, then we are not supportive of moving forward with a bid either. Next slide, please. So this is a video. I won't show it now, but because I did share the link with you, so you're able to watch this on your own time, and I hope you take the chance to do it. This is actually being shared today with MLAs and city council members, or perhaps even late last night, and it will be becoming shared publicly on Monday. And so over the weekend, we will be preparing the launch of this video, and this is our teaser, our sizzler video to help people understand the possibilities and the opportunities with our games. Next slide, please. So for those of you that don't know what the Commonwealth Games are, 2030 would actually be the 100th anniversary. They were originally called the Empire Games, and they were first hosted in Hamilton, Ontario. The proposed Commonwealth Games, so the British Commonwealth Games in 2030, would include approximately 5,000 athletes, around 20 sports. They would be held, the events would held tentative, or not tentatively, but at the moment, they're being planned to be held in Calgary, Edmonton, Tsuut'ina First Nation, Enoch Cree First Nation, Canmore at the Canmore Nordic Center, so that's where mountain biking could be held, and then the road cycling could be held somewhere between Banff and Lake Louise, potentially on the Bow Valley Parkway. Of note is the Commonwealth Games are known as the Friendly Games, and I would say that they are quite a socially progressive games. They're the first to have a Pride House. They were the first to have gender equity insofar as medal opportunities. They are the first games to have a reconciliation declaration, and they are the only multi-sport games on a global nature that have events for athletes with a disability fully integrated within the games itself. And that's of particular interest for me. I'm a past president of the Canadian Paralympic Committee, so the Parallel Olympics for athletes with a physical disability. That's what I teach primarily at Mount Royal University. And in a Commonwealth context, they have 5 events for athletes with a physical disability that are in the games themselves. So they're not 2 parallel games like they are in an Olympic and a Paralympic Games or a Pan American Games. It's one games that include athletes with the disabilities. There are 74 Commonwealth nations and territories that participate in the games, even though there's only 54 Commonwealth countries. But in an example, so for instance, the United Kingdom, there are 4 nations that participate, so Wales, Scotland, England, Northern Ireland. The games themselves are a 20-day event with 11 days of competition proposed for mid-August in 2030. But that's really, I don't want to say insignificant, but within the grand scheme of our bid and the grand scheme of this proposal, it's relatively insignificant. It's the 6.5 years leading up to August 2030. It's the 7 years after that that really are what's important, and why we would argue that this is a prudent investment of taxpayer monies, dollars, and our time and our energy. Next slide, please. So some key dates, and you can see that we're kind of halfway through this decision tree or calendar. So we have submitted the feasibility file on May 31st. We have hosted individuals from the International Commonwealth Games Federation for tours of the facilities at the venues that I mentioned earlier. We have presented to the City of Edmonton and the City of Calgary City Council members for information in early July. And right now, what we're doing is we're working on the formal bid document. Right now, one of the questions that we often get is budget. When is the budget going to be ready? At the moment, we have a pencil down date of mid-August, August 15th, when we're hoping then to have everything submitted, and then we can tabulate and circulate and share the final budget. So that would occur in early September. We do have tentatively set aside September the 12th for presentations to both the City of Calgary and the City of Edmonton. That would then trigger meetings with the province of Alberta and then the government of Canada, with a presentation taking place on November 14th and 15th, where we would be presenting. And again, this is all based on the assumption or the hope that we are given approval from the various 4 levels of government, including Enoch Cree and Tsuut'ina First Nations, for a presentation on November 14th and 15th to the International Commonwealth Games Federation, where we would be hoping to then be given the opportunity to host the games in 2030. Next slide, please. I've mentioned already a number of these partners, but I just wanted to present kind of the fulsome list of all of the groups that are involved in these conversations. Pursuing a games that is Alberta-wide has obviously some challenges, but it also has tremendous opportunities associated with it. So you can see the list of organizations that have already been communicated with and that are participating in this process. The two that I have not mentioned already that I thought are worth sharing right now are the Universities of Calgary and the University of Alberta. And they would be the athlete villages for the games themselves. So prior to school starting in September at those two institutions. Next slide, please. So I just quickly wanted to go through some of our preliminary findings as it relates to some of the public engagement that we have done. We did do a province-wide polling in April, and so again, it's somewhat dated and lots has happened since then, and so we need to be cognizant of that, and we need to go back and do our due diligence insofar as how Albertans feel about this. And I also think it's particularly worth noting that when we did the polling, at that time the budget, and still to this date, the budget has not been shared. And so that was, I think that's an important piece and perhaps one that you may have questions of. I think it's, from my perspective, as part of the group that's bidding to host the games, that overwhelmingly Albertans were supportive in principle of hosting the games. And I also think it's worth noting that those outside of the centers that were actually being proposed to host sporting events were also supportive of it. And so individuals from Fort McMurray, Red Deer, Lethbridge, Grand Prairie, Medicine Hat, they were supportive of the province hosting the games. And I'll spend some time towards the end of this presentation talking a little bit about how areas that do not host the specific games have an opportunity to participate in the games themselves. Next slide, please. The second piece of community engagement that we've participated in, and this is actually one of the roles that I've had, including this presentation to you today, is connecting and meeting with a variety of stakeholders and important individuals as it relates to how the games could unfold. And so we've engaged with a smattering of individuals, and not just in a sport context, not just in a political context, but from a social agency perspective. So for instance, I've had chances to have tours of the mustard seed in the cold, and trying to understand how a games could impact or help address other issues outside of more the traditional elements specific to sport, as an example. We will continue to do this, and we're just in the process now of deliberating and considering how we may have more specific community engagement leading up to some of the conversations and decisions that need to be made in August and in September. Next slide, please. So I want to spend a little bit of time talking about where the legacy of these games could come from and the impact that they could have outside of just, again, those 2 weeks, those 3 weeks in August of 2030. I'm cognizant of time, and so I don't want to go through each slide specifically, but I did share those with you in advance, and you're more than welcome to reconnect with me after the presentation, or if we have time for questions at the end of the presentation insofar as asking specific questions. But we've divided it into these 6 areas. So Indigenous reconciliation and partnership, economic development, the facility expansion, so both kind of renewal of existing facilities and also the building of new ones, youth attraction and retention, arts and culture, and multicultural inclusion and celebration. Next slide, please. So the first area of impact and legacy that we see is on Indigenous reconciliation. And this, I think, really presents an interesting opportunity to address specific calls to action in the Truth and Reconciliation calls to action, and particularly number 91, which calls upon officials of host countries and international events such as the Commonwealth Games to ensure Indigenous peoples' territorial protocols are respected and local communities are engaged in all aspects of planning and participating in such events. And so Alberta 2030 is fully committed to upholding those principles, and all of our planning groups include government and Indigenous partner representatives on our board of directors, including our board of directors, with representatives from Tsuut'ina Nation and Enoch Cree First Nation. Next slide, please. From an economic development perspective, as one example, and again, I'm not naive to what happened with the 2026 games and decision by the state of Victoria, being led by the city of Melbourne. But in looking at games from 2018, which were held in Gold Coast, in Queensland in Australia, and then the 2022 games in Birmingham in the UK, there have been positive economic development. And I also shared with you a report that we had created, that PwC created for us on the economic impact of these games. And again, it shows a positive return from an economic development perspective. And just as an example, so when the Gold Coast hosted the games, one of their focuses was on the agro industry, which I know would be comparable to something that we would want to be doing here. And the data from the 2018 games was that there was $488 million of foreign investment over a 10-year period in the agro industry in the Gold Coast. Now, again, we can't guarantee that that would take place in an Alberta context, but I think that's an example of an economic development benefit of hosting the games and the opportunities to connect with other nations on a global scale. Next slide, please. Again, I don't want to skim over this slide, but I also don't want to spend time focusing on it because, again, this is something that you can be doing on your own. And I also then shared with you, as I mentioned earlier, the PwC report. So if you do have questions for this, I'm happy to respond to them, but perhaps we can save that for the questions at the end. Next slide, please. I did mention the importance of addressing renewed facilities, and so the Commonwealth Games in Edmonton are an example of this. I mean, by the time the 2030 games come around, they're 50 years old. And so not only do we need to build new facilities, but we need to renew facilities that have been built from the legacy of previous games as well. And so assisting with the redevelopment of the Commonwealth Games, or the Commonwealth Stadium, sorry, in Edmonton, would be an example of that. Next slide, please. From a new facility perspective, some interesting examples perhaps that you might find worth note in a Calgary context would be a cricket pavilion in Northeast Calgary. The sport of cricket is just ballooning in a Calgary context from the number of individuals who are participating. And then another example would be a shooting facility in Tsuut'ina Nation. And so it's actually an existing facility from the Currie Army Barracks days. From Mount Royal. Actually, Mount Royal University used to be the Air Force Base with the Currie Army Barracks. And so it's relatively close to the Grey Eagles Casino and Mount Royal University. And it would be transitioned from a competitive venue to a commercial one, and then would also be used for training purposes for the Tsuut'ina Police Force. And so that's an example of a new facility. And then the other one from a kind of a local Calgary context would be the multi-sport field house in Northwest Calgary. And so our bid would ensure that that would also take place. Next slide, please. Another pillar of our legacy and impact would be on youth attention and attraction and development. And so in certainly the work that we've done, people want to live in the Bow Valley, the Calgary, the regions surrounding Calgary. I'm actually a resident of Cochrane myself, because of recreation, because of lifestyle, because of livability. And the games can assist and ensure that these things are both being shared and also from a structural perspective being enhanced. Next slide, please. Arts and culture is another pillar of our legacy and impact. And this is one where communities such as the Chestermeres, the High Rivers, the Okotoks, the Foothill counties of the world can get involved through both enhancement of kind of what you've already done, but also in the ensuring that it continues moving forward. And so again, as a resident of Cochrane, I'm familiar with the filming of Joe Pickett and the opportunity and the ability to enhance the profile of Alberta on a global scale. The Commonwealth actually accounts for anywhere between a quarter to a third of the world's population. And so the reach potential for a Commonwealth Games is actually rather significant. And again, you think about the opportunity to promote what we have in an Alberta context. I was in Denver a couple of months ago for an academic conference, and I met with a number of young men kind of in their mid 20s, and they were asking me where I was from. So I said Calgary, and they went, "Oh, we love Heartland." Like, really? These 25-year-old guys, they're, oh yeah, well, that's one of our favorite shows. Anyway, so my wife grew up in Turner Valley, and my father-in-law still lives in Diamond Valley. And his buddies drive the trucks for the Heartland Cruise all the time. And so I was able to share that I had this connection to Heartland. And this is an opportunity, a Commonwealth Games would be an opportunity for us to showcase those kind of things and then to enhance that they continue moving forward as well. Next slide, please. So I've already touched on a number of these things, but particularly for those of you that are not in Calgary or Edmonton or Enoch, Cree or Cetina, Canmore, or the Bow Valley Parkway, where you would be hosting the events in the 2 weeks of August in 2030, there are still many, many, many opportunities to benefit from and to also participate in the hosting of the games. And that could include an example with Birmingham, for instance, when they hosted the games, is any person that purchased a ticket from outside of the UK received specific tourism examples of things they could do before and following the games. So traveling down to High River, traveling east to Chestermere, traveling to the foothills of the Rocky View counties. And so these are examples of ways that areas outside of the major urban centers could participate and benefit from a hosting of the games. Next slide, please. So my ask, why am I here? So part of my job is to try to ensure that there's interest, that the games reflect the priorities and the needs of the province. So I'm not here just to have an ask, but I'm also here to listen and try to respond to any questions. Certainly the bid group would benefit from a demonstrated support for the games in principle, recognizing that you have not seen the budget. And so we're cognizant of that and we're not naive to that. And I'm also happy again to receive a conversation and participate in a conversation that relates to how your region, your town, your city could participate in the games. We're looking for a formal letter of support from the collective, if it's Ocho's, to demonstrate that in principle they support the bidding in this of moving forward. So Chair Clark, I'll finish my formal presentation there. I hope I didn't overstay my welcome, and I'm certainly happy to respond to any questions now, or I can do so at another time. And if you go to the last slide, please. That's my email there. And again, I'm happy to respond to any queries directly to individuals, or I'm also happy, Chair Clark, time permitting, if you want me to respond to any questions now.
David, thank you. Yeah, let's do that. Let's open it up. There's a lot there, and thank you very much for taking us through that and answering preemptively some of the questions around the regional impact and how that would potentially play out. So with that, I will open it up to anyone who has any questions or comments on David's presentation. We'll have David with us here for a little bit if anybody wishes to weigh in. So go ahead.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, go ahead, Peter.
Thank you. Thanks, David. I'm a little curious when Calgarians they had their vote on the Olympic bid and it was defeated. Where does the majority of Albertans come forward and say, I want these games versus the other? So if you could answer that, that'd be great. And I have a follow-up to that. Thanks.
Well, I'm not sure I have a specific answer for that question. In part, I have to admit, I don't want to say we were surprised by the 70% excuse me, polling that we did earlier, but we were certainly pleased with it. I was also part of the group that bid for the 2026, again, as a volunteer, the 2026 games. And so I'm very cognizant of the failed plebiscite in Calgary as it relates to that. I would be guessing as to the difference between those two insofar as the plebiscite in Calgary was Calgary only. The polling that we did was province-wide. I might also guess that it could have been the timing and just the context, where the province was at and where the city was at when that took place. But I don't have a specific answer for that. And we still need to go back to the communities. And this is a request specifically from the cities of Calgary and the cities of Edmonton council members in order to ensure that public sentiment is still supportive of the games. And so that will take place. And we'll continue on an ongoing basis. I would say, the conversation that I've had Now, again, when you're having these conversations face to face, perhaps people are not willing to share the negative comments, but they've been overwhelmingly positive, but always in principle too. And again, I'm cognizant of that and not naive to the fact that the budget has not been shared yet.
Okay, and thanks, David. I appreciate that. And just so I'll be honest, I'm a little hesitant to say I fully support something when I don't know what it's going to cost our community and what benefits it'll bring specifically to the region and to Airdrie. So are you like you're looking for something in principle? Because in principle, I believe this is a good thing, and I'm not certain. I haven't spoken to my council about this yet, but is it basically a letter that says in principle we support this without knowing any of the real details surrounding what I just want to make sure I'm understanding what you're looking for today.
Yes, Peter, that's exactly what I'm looking for. So it would be a letter of support in principle of the concept and of the bid moving forward, recognizing, and if you wanted to even to include that in the letter itself, recognizing that you don't have the full information as it relates to the budget or other specifics. And again, from a timeline perspective, I'm hoping to have that as something that we could share publicly, perhaps by late August, but I don't know that for certain.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Peter. Good questions. Councillor Hanson, you're up next. Go ahead.
Yeah, through the chair, thank you for the presentation, and I had a similar thought as Mayor Brown did, but I saw on the timeline, I think the final decision from Calgary was it early September? Was that? So since we're a major part of the regional board, can we really provide a letter prior to that decision of Calgary? Perhaps if it's in principle, that makes sense, but would it be not far stronger to come out after the official decision out of Calgary?
Well, Councillor, I think it could probably go either way. I think in some respects there's value in having a letter in principle from a group such as yourselves to encourage Calgary City Council to move forward with it. And if they see that the regional group is supportive of it in principle, then that may encourage them to also then be supportive of it moving forward, as opposed to waiting until after the decision that they make. That would still be valuable because then it would have to then go to the province, and showing support to the province that this group is supportive is also valuable. So I would be grateful for either, but I would probably, if I had a preference, it would likely be that the letter would be submitted prior to Calgary City Council meeting on September the 12th.
Okay, and a follow on, more related to a little bit to budget, I guess, but part of the success in Alberta has always been our strong volunteerism.
Yeah.
And that was a major, I remember from the '88 Olympics, but
You still have your Sun Ice jacket? Is that?
my dad might have one. He did the Canmore Health, he was in healthcare, so that was his thing. But how, because we're looking out in the future, 2030, how do you know what like it's already declining in our communities, on our boards? How do we project what volunteerism is going to be like in 2030? And is it critical to this whole thing working, is volunteerism?
Well, you got a couple questions. Councillor Hanson, that's a tough question. And so even, so one of the things that I'm involved in is adaptive physical activity and disability sport. And I have noticed, Stephen, in the last couple of years, the students that I teach declining in their interest and their willingness to volunteer. And so I think this is a challenge across the board. I don't think it's specific to major games. I don't think it's, I just think the volunteerism is slow to rebound from the pandemic. Hopefully by 2030 that will have taken place, or perhaps even the games themselves can act as a bit of a catalyst to engage and encourage that thinking and that kind of mindset to reoccur. And so to your point, that has been and it continues to be, kind of one of the great things about our province is that, that willingness to do things for the greater good. without doing it because it's your job. You do it because of your community, commitment. And so perhaps the games can act as that catalyst, but I mean, to your last point, it's definitely a crucial component to the success of the games is ensuring that the volunteerism takes place. Now, I would say, the Winter Games, when they were held in Red Deer a couple of years ago, the Canada Winter Games had outstanding volunteer participation and commitment. And so, perhaps we can learn from them and build off of that. And again, I know the Summer Games in Okotoks and the Winter Games when they were in Airdrie are other examples where they did have great volunteer turnout. And so again, perhaps we can benefit and learn from that.
Yeah, and I could believe that, we'll call it micro volunteerism at a very local level might be declining. People are too busy, whatever. But maybe on a big event like this, maybe it spurs us on to greatness.
Yeah, and other smaller examples. So we've talked to, I mentioned earlier, having a tour of the mustard seed and in from the cold. And so we were looking at opportunities for people who perhaps are unhoused at the moment, using volunteer experiences to get avocational training that then allow them to get professional opportunities following the games and then continuing in their, in their journey of becoming housed. And so we are looking at ways by which volunteerism, participation in the games, whether it's almost a hybrid of volunteerism and perhaps receiving a stipend, could be an opportunity to address some other issues and challenges that our cities face.
Cool.
Good. Thank you, Councillor Hanson. Councillor Seward, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Just wondering, this letter of support, if we were to provide it, where does it go after that, or who is it specifically for, or how is it interpreted?
Good question. And I should have said that earlier, my apologies. So the letter would be addressed to our two co-chairs, who are Elizabeth Cannon and Cheryl Gibson. Elizabeth Cannon is the former president of the University of Calgary. Cheryl Gibson, former Olympic swimmer and based at Edmonton. So that would be who the letter would be addressed to, and I can provide the specific details to Jordan or Chair Clark. And then the letter then would be able to be shared and used to share with, for instance, MLAs, the province of Alberta, or Calgary City Council or Edmonton City Council, as it relates to demonstrating support in principle.
All right. Any follow-up, Rob?
No, I think that that covers it. Thanks.
Okay, good. So I kind of from a process perspective, we're a little bit challenged because unfortunately Mayor Gondek had to step out to some other meetings out east today. So I think it's going to be challenging to get a consensus here, given that we're missing and looking at the screen quickly, at least one member from this conversation. But what I suggest maybe we do, and Jordan, I'll look to you on this, perhaps we can follow up with an email, circulate an email to members to see if there is willingness and interest in a letter. And David, I'll just say that I think one of the challenges, a bit of a paradox, I guess, a bit of a conflict. If this is going to Calgary Council in September, I think that having Calgary send a letter to itself is potentially a little bit of a process, sort of, backwards, if you will. I don't and won't and can't speak for Mayor Gondek or Calgary on that, but I just sort of thinking through kind of procedurally how that conversation may go. I guess I asked that in the form of a question. I don't know the answer. I don't know where that would land, but that may be something we hear back. But until we ask that question, I guess we don't know. So I think that would maybe be something I would suggest is I'll just maybe test with the group here. Perhaps at this point we can just receive for information this presentation. Take that away though with Jordan driving that conversation amongst the members in an email discussion. But put that out there to the group. Mayor Janung, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I first of all, thank you, David, for the presentation. I think it's my third time hearing it, and and honestly, from the first time, it was I was skeptical. I was like, what are we up to? I didn't really know a lot about the Commonwealth Games. So thank you for the information. I feel a lot more informed now about the impacts and a lot of the benefits that our region could see from this. So I'm in full support of signing a letter, especially given the conditions that you've outlined very well. I thought that, it's in principle only. We don't have the details of a budget. We're not committing anything financially as a municipality or even as a board. But I agree, Greg, with the path forward that perhaps we receive his information today. Everybody can kind of have some soak time in the presentation, understand what it is that we're talking about, and that also allows the City of Calgary to weigh in. And if Mayor Gondek is fine with proceeding with the letter prior to her council seeing it, I think then we kind of have the green light to go ahead as a board. If she's not, then maybe we wait and let their council deliberate on that, and then we follow up with this discussion. So I think we kind of have two paths forward, two options to us. But I do think it's important that we give some kind of runway to the City of Calgary and their time with this. Well, thank you, David, for the presentation today.
You're welcome.
Good. I think that makes
Thank you.
good sense. Sorry. Do we, I don't know if we need a specific motion instructing Jordan or admin to do that. Do we feel we need that motion, or can we just simply go with a receive for information? Jordan, are you comfortable with the discussion we've had here and the path forward?
Yeah, I feel it's been pretty clear. I'll reach out to the City of Calgary, understand their feelings about it. I can communicate that back to the board. And then if they're comfortable with it, the board does have the ability to vote on things via email. And I think it's also difficult to vote on a potential letter of support when you haven't seen the letter. And so then, assuming that everyone's comfortable with that, then I would, draft a letter, circulate that letter so that the board knows exactly what is being said, and we can go from there.
I think that's great. Okay.
Thank you.
Anything else from anyone before we move on? Anything else for David? Okay, seeing nothing, then I'll ask for a motion to receive for information a presentation from the Alberta 2030 Commonwealth Games Corp. Anyone wish to make that motion? Councillor Hanson, thank you. Second. Mayor Genung, thank you very much. Got a whole bunch of seconds there. I grab Mayor Genung first. Any discussion? And then by exception, anyone wishing to vote opposed to that motion to receive for information? Seeing, hearing none, that carries. Thank you very much. David, thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate you taking the time to join us and provide us with that update, presentation, and information. And through Jordan, I think you'll hear back from us here in the next coming weeks as to where we land on all this.
Okay. Thank you.
All right.
I
Good luck.
appreciate it.
Thank you again.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye. Okay, so we have now exhausted all of the substantive items on the agenda. We do have a couple of items under roundtable. Jordan, I'm going to kick it over to you to talk about advocacy and one other thing, and then there's one other item I've got on a roundtable, just raise as well. So Jordan, we'll go to you.
Thank you very much, Chair, members of the board. So in terms of the advocacy direction that was given in the closed session last meeting, the letters will be going out soon. We're just waiting for the Minister of Municipal Affairs mandate letter to come out. That has, the government of Alberta has taken a different approach this time, that they are not releasing all the mandate letters in one go, but rather releasing them daily or every couple of days. And so as soon as we have that, it will finalize the letters and send those out. I'm happy to answer any questions or receive any feedback on that. All right, seeing and hearing none. Also just want to take the opportunity to let the board know that this will actually be JP Leclerc's last board meeting with us. JP is going to be going and working on his master's in Edmonton starting in September. And so he will be moving up there sometime in August. And so we just wanted to thank JP for his significant amount of work in the region and on the board since inception. This is the first time we've had a staff member leave us. And so just wanted to thank JP for all of his hard work and wish him well in school in the fall.
Yeah, thanks, JP. We really do appreciate everything you've done. I know you're a quiet guy. We will miss your very straightforward and to the point presentations. Really appreciate your work on Deal. You've done a huge amount of work on the GPS GIS side of things, and I understand it's Masters of Planning you're taking. Is that right? So perhaps you can re-engage with us at some point once you've finished your masters. So, but JP, really appreciate everything you've done. It's benefited this organization and the region tremendously. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Sorry, I can't while I'm streaming do much, but thank you very much.
All right, good. And come back from Edmonton as well. That's also an important part of the remit. Yeah. Okay, that's great. Thank you very much for that. And the only other thing, do we have anything else under roundtable? Anyone else wishes to raise? I will say I've hopefully you've all received the invitation to the Rocky View County Ag Tour on August 31st. And I've signed up for that. I think it sounds like seats are going quick. So if you can, probably I think we know someone who might be able to slip you in if we're if there's a wait list. But I'm looking forward to that very much. And if anyone else has any of those sorts of things happening or whatever else is happening in your communities, either just send a note to the entire board and the whole group, or Jordan and Shelley can get that around as well. So if there's anything like that, please let us know. We can let everyone know in the group. Anything else on roundtable? This is our last meeting here as a board until October. We'll take a bit of a hiatus here through August, and then get into committee work in September and board in October. And if there's nothing else under roundtable, I'll note we get the opportunity, as I say, to visit the beautiful town of Okotoks in October, on October 13th, for our next board meeting. Our next governance committee meeting, September 15th, 9 a.m. online and GoToMeeting, and then land use and servicing on September 21st, 9:30 on GoToMeeting. And with that, unless there's any last minute buzzer beaters, the agenda being exhausted, I will declare the meeting terminated.
Summer Games is on in Okotoks, so come for a visit.
Yeah,
it's, an extra 6,000 people in our community, so it's calm and easygoing, and everybody's navigating like they're supposed to, and no current residents are upset about extra traffic. So it's awesome.
That's ideal.
But the athletes are having a great time.
If you could let us know how to accomplish that in other contexts, I'm sure that would be very much appreciated. Well, good luck with that, and I'm hopeful that's having a significantly net positive experience and impact on Okotoks.
Yeah, we'll see how it turns out by the end of the weekend. Thanks,
Enjoy
everybody.
it while you can. It'll soon be gone. Yeah.
Exactly.
Anyway, have a great August, everybody.
Have a great summer, everyone. We will see you in the fall. Thanks all. Be well.